So, and I think this happens with us a lot of times, whether you're at work or starting something, just generally, we try to think that our actions, everyone's watching us, everybody cares about us, talks about us, and it's beyond your family, nobody does, right? And I think once you realize that, it changes your perspective about life and about failure and about shame and trying things, because just you're not that significant in the world. And I think that's what I learned. It took me 10 years to learn it, but when I learned it, that made it easy for me to go quit my job, take those risks, because I was like, no one cares, there's only upside.
This is Andrew Vance, and you're listening to Choose the Hard Way, where I explore the obstacles people overcome to do great things with peak performers from sports, business, tech, the arts, the military, and many other disciplines. Please hit subscribe and take a moment to give this show a 5-star rating in Apple Podcasts. It helps the show rank higher in search so more people can find the powerful lessons my guests share. Thanks to everyone who's taken a moment to listen and to hit the stars. If you've got feedback or want to recommend a guest, please email me at choosethehardway@gmail.com. You are what you overcome. Choose the hard way. My guest is Neil D'Souza, an entrepreneur at the intersection of tech, education, and human potential. Neil has lived, traveled, and worked in 40 countries and is an Ironman triathlete. Originally from Mumbai, India, at an early age, Neil set an unbelievable swimming record that involved spending 79 hours in a pool and landed him on MTV. Neil started his career in tech at Cisco, where he was part of a team that spearheaded the 4G LTE protocol. During his time at Cisco, Neil developed a strong passion for helping underprivileged communities and sought to bridge the education gap for children in remote regions of the world. Later, Neil was the founder and CEO of Zaya Learning Labs, a disruptive educational startup that brings affordable education solutions to low-income communities around the world. Most recently, he's the founder of GetSetUp, a place for active older adults to learn, connect, and share with peers in small, intimate classes. We recorded this interview during the early days of GetSetUp, when everything, including the company's name, was evolving. You can learn more about GetSetUp at getsetup.io. You can find that link in the show notes. And before we get started, I want to thank my friend Camille Ricketts for introducing me to Neil. Thank you, Camille, and thank you, Neil. Now let's get started.
One of my favorite things being an endurance athlete is to have a lot of carbs and sugar. So my favorite breakfast is granola with salted caramel ice cream with cacao nibs. And I try to do that at least 3 times a week.
Okay, and what kind of ice cream?
It's the Humphreys Snow Cone.
Whoa, that's some pretty uptown ice cream you're going. You want to have the best, I guess, right? When you're going to have ice cream in the morning.
Yeah, man, it's nutrition.
If you like eating ice cream or sweets, like the time to do it, it's right after your activity. Early.
Yeah, in the morning. I mean, you can see I don't really care about body composition. I just go.
Yeah, that's the best attitude, is to care the most about ice cream being delicious. And I like the approach of integrating cereal with ice cream. I like putting grape nuts on my ice cream because it tastes like an ice cream cone.
I do put coconut sometimes on it. It tastes good.
Okay.
Yeah, try that.
Shredded coconut?
Shredded coconut,
coconut. Yeah. Okay, and of course, the always popular cacao nibs.
Yeah, the best.
Yeah, can't stop that. Let's start with tech. When you entered tech.
Yeah, so I'm originally from India, right? So I moved here for school and moved to the Bay Area for tech. I worked at Cisco for a while as an engineer. And I think tech was very different back in the day, like early 2004, 5. And I spent a couple of years in the Bay Area. And I think after 5 years of doing what I did at Cisco, I kind of got tired of it. I was kind of getting drawn into traveling again, taking some time off and doing something a little bit more meaningful. So
what were you doing at Cisco though? Because this is kind of interesting.
I was in a team that was trying to build what we know today as 4G. And so the inside joke was, we used to call it LTE, which was long-term evolution, which meant it would never happen. So when I joined it was you're the LTE team. You guys are a bunch of kids out of college. Build this stuff because it's a nice project. And then 2006 happened and the iPhone came out. And then internet on your phone became real. And that took off. So it was really good to be part of an engineering team that was really a startup within Cisco that nobody believed in. And we got to build the first giant router that brought the iPhone movement, yeah.
And that's where 4G came from.
Yeah, I mean, 4G is basically a giant router with your mobile connection. And
yeah, you tell me. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, 3G was everything on your phone was going through these big antennas and kind of like your small Wi-Fi routers. But when we went to 4G, everything happened through the internet, and so we needed a new type of routers that could handle higher bandwidth, more number of users connected to it. And so there were basically two companies that could build those routers. Cisco was one of them, and there's one, the infamous Huawei in China. And so yeah, it was good to be part of a team and like do the first deployment of 4G up in Napa Valley. That's where we tested it. And when that happened, being part of a startup, we also realized that the company kind of didn't believe that 12 young kids could take this to scale. So we just went and bought a company for like $5 billion. And that's kind of when we realized, all right, this is time to leave.
Wow. What did it feel like to do a project? I mean, that's like a pretty definitive technology to just casually be working on. It sounds like you're kind of like, oh yeah, build 4G. What did it feel like at the time? I mean,
it was really interesting because no one knew how to go about doing it. The standards were just getting defined of what 4G should look like how would mobile internet work at scale. And so it was really nice to be part of a team that was doing R&D, a lot of academics and also practitioners. There's this notion now that you can build products really quick.
Right.
And prototype and like launch, but this took 9 months of just writing documents and 3 months of coding. So building something like that required so much planning and back and forth because it was something new and very core to the infrastructure, right? So it was interesting to be part of that team. I remember we used to have lockdowns when the pilots would fail where we were not allowed to leave office for 4 days till we fixed a bug, because it was telecom and people couldn't communicate if we didn't get it right. So I know there were times where you just, I had a bed under my desk and it was kind of like a happy camper at work with my bicycle. And but it was fun. It was just, a startup within a big company. And yeah, I think that was a good experience, but also led to burnout.
Yeah, and thinking about like the current tech environment and what we know of it today, what were the snacks like back then?
There was no snacks.
So you were locked in for 4 days with no snacks? Well,
I mean, we just ate a lot of pizza, but if you think of traditional Bay Area companies, we didn't have perks. I remember I joined and we had free Coca-Cola and that was taken away because of cost cutting. So we had pretty shitty coffee and that was it.
What did you think the day they took your Coke away?
Well, I was okay with it. I'm not a big fan of Coke.
Okay.
But for me, being in the Bay Area, that was my experience. So the bar was pretty low. So whenever I saw these, my friends, like when they started working at Facebook and other companies and had all these perks, I was like, wow, like this, I have shortchanged myself.
Right.
But no, it was a great experience. I think kind of helped define part of my journey.
What did you learn about working with people?
I think it's probably the hardest thing to do when everybody is hyper competitive, and you had to define your own path. So that's kind of what I did. I very early on set that expectation that, look, I want to work X number of hours. I don't want to get promoted. This is what matters to me, which is, biking to work every day, which was like 60 miles to Cisco from from San Francisco. And I wanted to go and teach as a volunteer. Like, those things mattered. So I set that right up front with my manager. So it was easy to then not get distracted by all the other things that happen here, like the competition, and everyone's just like trying to pull you down, and like the politics of working in a company. So I felt I became the most hated guy in the team because I was just always on my bike shorts walking around, and I didn't give a fuck. So.
And then you would break telecommunications and they'd be like, get back under your desk, go to sleep.
Yeah, I think the last project, this is an interesting story, but when we did launch, obviously no one was anticipating the kind of traffic, like people would, the stuff people would watch on their phone, right? So naturally, when people started using internet on the phone with iPhone coming out, AT&T and these companies couldn't keep up. So they're like, hey, can you fix this? Can you make it faster? And sort of the natural inclination was maybe people are watching a lot of YouTube video. And so let's make video faster and optimized, and, so it streams better. And what happens is these telecom operators don't share the data of what actually is happening. So we were working in a silo, trying to make YouTube faster on phones. And then finally, 3 months in, we got a log that the top 19 sites were basically adult entertainment. So I remember the time where someone had to volunteer to do testing, and you had to sit in this lab with these $1 million routers and basically keep streaming and watching the same piece of content for months together just to make sure that it works well on the phone, because that was what people were doing on the internet when it came out on the mobile phone. So that kind of got mind-numbing.
And as somebody who's very talented in a very highly in-demand technical discipline, like back then, now, like looking back at that time in your life, it sounds like you had a pretty clear sense of, you had boundaries, you were doing something you enjoyed doing, it was having big impact in a certain way in the world. But I'm sure that there were, like everybody, I'm sure you had shit that you were worrying about. Like, and when you look back, like what were the things that like preoccupied your mind that you were like, worried about?
I mean, back then, I must say, I didn't have a lot of things to worry about from an existential point of view. I really didn't feel like I was building cool stuff, but I think it was serving a population that I didn't think needed it the most. Like when I thought of like internet access and networking and the potential for it, I thought, coming from India and having traveled the world, I felt like there were a lot more people who needed it for very core things, like not for watching YouTube, right? Like for education and for health. So I just felt that if I wait the normal course of time, it's going to take 10, 15 years till it gets to everyone. And that's a big sort of baggage to carry when I could do something about it. So that bothered me. I didn't know what to do and how to go about doing it. So I just one day decided it's time to basically quit and I'll figure it out. So that was scary because I didn't have a plan. I just knew that I was going to leave everything behind, leave the country. And I was on a work visa, which meant if I left the country, the chances of me coming back here was pretty slim. So those things bothered me, but I decided to take the call, and I quit. But as a fellow cyclist, you'll know, I think I was biking to work one day. I think it was like the week before I was going to officially leave Cisco, and I had a pretty terrible bike accident. There's actually a grate on San Francisco named after me. It's called Grate of Doom Neil. So I'm the Grate of Doom Neil. And, had an accident, fell on my face, and that basically had a dislocated jaw. And for 9 months, I had to...
That's a bad bike wreck.
That was a pretty bad bike wreck. And so none of these are real.
Oh my God.
And so for 9 months I couldn't go. So I was in this situation where I had given up my home, sold my car, sold everything. I was really packed my bags and ready to leave. And this was like my going away bike ride, and I had this accident. So, that meant I had to stay back for 9 months, because for 6 months I couldn't actually eat a lot of solid while they were constructing my jaw, reconstructing it. And that was probably the hardest experience I had to go through, with everything that comes with healthcare system here. But I think that made me tough.
Dude, like, what did you think when your face hit the ground?
I don't remember. I had a concussion.
Okay.
I just remember showing up.
You were knocked out?
Yeah, I was knocked out. I just remember waking up in SF General, which is not a good hospital to wake up in. And unfortunately, the only trauma clinic in the city. So, I think I woke up there and then was worried about my bike. And
of course. It's always, hey, is my bike okay?
Is my bike okay? Right. And I'm pretty sure some of the doctors wanted to steal my bike. They were like, that's a nice bike. Can we keep it?
What bike did you have at the time?
I had a Cervelo P2 that I was riding that day. Yeah.
What wheels did you have on it?
I had a Zip 404.
Wow.
Yeah, it was the Wednesdays where we would hammer down to Google and Cisco, where everyone just had a baseline and we tried to get there under 2 hours. So it was a bad idea, drafting.
Yeah, and for people who don't live in the Bay Area, there's a large group, SF to G, that rides down to the South Bay from the city, right?
Yeah, it started as a small group of engineers, and then it's just grown to, I think, over like 5,000-6,000 people who bike to different tech companies now.
Yeah.
But it's a great commute. It's 40 miles to Google and 60 miles if you're going further south. And a great community. And actually, that was the part I looked forward to the most.
Right.
Going to work was the commute.
And when you had that accident, what was your game plan when you left the Cisco gig? Like, what did you want to do? And like, how long had that been gnawing at you?
I mean, it was gnawing at me almost for a year. So my game plan was to actually go and teach. And so what I'd done is I'd kind of reached out to about 6,000 like orphanages and schools around the world. And I found a database online and said, hey, look, I'm like, I have these skill sets. Right about then, there were these things like Khan Academy coming up. Okay. So a lot of people creating content. So I was like, hey, can I come down and I know how to teach computers and math, and I'll come and set up your labs, because I had known that people were donating computers to all these, developing countries, but no one was using it. They didn't know what to do with it, right? So I just found a database of all these failed projects, mailed them, and said, hey, can I come? And I got like 5% of them responded saying, yeah, sure, we'll take free work. So I had a plan. I was kind of developing this plan that I'll take some content and I'll go there and I'll set up these computer labs and hopefully use that to teach kids. Using world-class content. So that plan was formulating, and I was developing it in isolation without realizing there was no internet in most of these countries, right? Okay. So that was the shock.
All right.
When I landed there. But that was basically my plan. I had a plan in mind. I was going to take 12 months off. It was a little ambitious. I was going to spend a month in each country. I had 12 countries planned up, a month in each lab. I was like, I'm going to show up day one. Everything's going to be there, working condition, and I'm going to go and set it up. And, next day kids are going to be learning. So very, very ambitious, rosy plan that obviously failed on landing. It
sounds like you were really confident, though, on the front end.
Yeah, as an engineer, you're just confident that you can do anything, right? So
I love it.
You're like, I can build stuff, so I can fix it.
Okay.
I was quite shocked when I landed, and that was, I think, the first experience of failure, which was very grounding for me on that journey, for me. So I landed in Indonesia, in a town which was just kind of, it was affected by the tsunami a couple of years ago. So there were a lot of schools and orphanages, and they said we had computers. I was like, sure, you have computers. It must be working. I never asked that question. So I showed up, and of course it wasn't working. They had never turned it on in 3 years. And so...
Would they have like an Apple IIe?
No, I don't even know what they had. I think it had a lot of cobwebs. It was some Windows machine that just didn't work. But
probably took like 3 weeks for it to get all the updates onto the machine.
Yeah, it took me 3 weeks without internet. So
oh my God!
Hard. But it was just a great experience, just being there.
What was your experience when you finally got into that environment? You were doing what you would wanted to do? Were you like, oh shit, this is going to be way harder than I thought it would be? Or were you like, I'm doing this, it's going to work?
Yeah, I think I equated to all my endurance sports activities. I sign up without thinking about how hard it's going to be. And once you're in, you can't give up. Like there's no DNF, right? So that was it. So I landed there. Nothing was going as planned. I'm in the small town. There's no computer shop. There's no internet. And it's like, I need to figure something out. So I was quite depressed. I think initially I couldn't speak the language. I was like, oh, maybe I should go back. And I decided to just persist for a little bit and see what happens. And
what made you decide to persist instead of just packing your bag?
I think it was just like, this is something programmed in my mind, because I think as a kid I had, done some crazy stuff, which was almost impossible.
Yeah, we'll talk
for most humans.
And some suspense. We're foreshadowing. We're going to get to that.
Yeah, so I thought this is pretty much. I've been in the situation. It can't get worse. What's the thing I'm most comfortable with, which is building, and I'm an engineer. So I was like, let me try to fix this and problem solve. And so I stayed for a couple of weeks, and I figured out something that ended up taking the next 8 years of my life.
Right. But before you started, it hadn't even crossed your mind that you could fail or that this would go totally sideways.
No, actually not, because I actually don't think about failure.
Yeah, that's how we're different. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think about failure.
In a lot of other ways too.
I like surprises. So I'm like, it's not the best thing when you have a partner in life to have that attitude, but I just don't think about failure. Yeah.
Where does that come from?
I can go back to my childhood.
Yeah, sure. Let's go back to your childhood. Like, how does one develop the attitude that like failure is not going to happen or it's not a possibility?
So I think I grew up. My parents took me swimming every day, like competitive swimming. And
how old were you when you started?
I think I was 7 when I started. But
do you know how old you were when you learned how to swim?
I think it was that time.
Okay.
I do remember I almost drowned, and as sort of a measure, my dad was like, I think you need to learn to swim. So I was
good idea.
Good idea. So yeah, I started to swim. I learned to swim.
Where did you grow up?
Grew up in Bombay, in India. And so, there were a couple of swimming pools and these, we call them ponds, which had, they may be 16, 17 feet with rainwater collecting in it.
Oh, wow, lakes. Cool.
So I almost drowned in one of them. And
cool / you almost drowned. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so I think that was when...
so they were like 17 feet deep?
Yeah, these are like tiny ponds that you see in... in the suburbs. It's kind of mini lakes. It's not really a lake.
Okay, so this is an outdoor
thing. And so I know when I almost got drowned, I got like the worst beating of my life from my grandmom saying that, you can't go there again.
So, were you there on your own, like with your buddies, or like
a couple of buddies?
What happened that day?
I just slipped in. We were trying to catch. We were naive as 7-year-olds trying to catch like some tiny fishes that were there, and I slipped in. I went down, and I dragged someone else with me, and I just all I remember is trying to come up and grab some air, and finally they had a chain. They pulled all of us out, and it was not that deep. To think of it today, nothing would have happened. But
were there a lot of other people there at the time, or just
like 4 or 5? Just a couple of
4
buddies.
or 5 of you?
Yeah.
And there was something sitting around that they could throw in to get you.
Well, they just made a human chain. And
they made a human chain.
Yeah, they made a human chain. And
smart kids.
Yeah. So I got the spanking of my life from my grandmom, and at the end of the day, my dad was like, let's get you into a pool so that this doesn't happen again.
You were also a kid who told the truth. So you told your parents this happened.
There was no way to hide it. I was wet. So it was completely wet, and there's no way to dry off. So I had to tell the truth.
Okay. All right. So that's what happened.
So,
all right.
But yeah, I learned swimming, and just nothing unusual. Just like anyone who learns, gets pulled into like a master's program. But I think at the age of 12, I used to compete in short distance swimming in India, and then at the age of 12, I had one of my fellow swimmers in the club who was 19. He comes up to me, and so this so this was part of the club I was swimming in was IIT. Bombay IIT is like the equivalent of MIT. So it's like really prestigious engineering college. So you get in at the age of 17, and pretty much if you get into IIT, you get into Harvard and one of these schools. So it's also very competitive because very few people get in. So I used to swim there. I was 12 and I had this guy Ashish with me who was 19, and I think he was trying to get into a good college in the US for his master's. So he comes up with this genius idea that, hey, there's a record for endurance swimming for 78 hours non-stop.
78, that's 7-8 hours.
7-8 hours.
Okay.
And his thing was, if I break this record, it increases my chances to get into school.
Like this kid really wanted to get into school.
You want to get into school.
Yeah.
I haven't spoken to him since then, so I'll tell you the story. But he came up with this idea, and obviously everyone else was his age, was more sensible. And so was my coach, and they're like, yeah, no one's doing it with you, right? So I think he was desperate, and I was naive, and I was like, sure, like, let's try, why not, right? And I think my parents thought that there's no way he's going to do this, right? Like, I could swim 12 hours nonstop. I used to do these things called swimathons. It sounds crazy now, but we used to have a race called Swimathon, which was 12 hours nonstop swimming, and to see who can go the furthest. So I think my record was 24 miles in 12 hours.
When you were like 10?
Yeah, 10, 11. So I kind of knew I could do that much, and I knew what pain felt in doing 12 hours.
Right.
But nothing like anything like in the 70s, right? But I was like, sure, I'll do it with you. So we both, with no training, because we never knew how would you train for something like this. The only thing we knew was we had to stop eating solid food a day before because we couldn't get out of the water to go to the restroom.
Oh, you have to stay. Yeah, you have to stay in the water the whole time.
Yeah,
right.
And the only thing we could do was liquid diets because you can actually pee in the pool and get away with it. So that was our preparation. Basically, no solid food a day before, and then jump in this pool and do laps. And so with a lot of energy and enthusiasm, we finished the first 12 hours, and I'm like, I feel good. I can go on. And it just got harder after that. We hit 24 hours, and as a 12-year-old, I had never gone without sleep for a night. And this was the first night I had not slept. But still, I had energy. I don't know what it was. Like, it's just like I could go on, right? And so a day passed, day 2, the press got news of it. And this is pre-internet, 1997. So MTV showed up because MTV was launching in India, and
MTV. Okay.
Yeah, I was on MTV for 3 days, and MTV India came in, and they're like, this is crazy, like these two kids are doing something nuts. So they started filming it, and then you're all over the news, and people were putting like these puzzles with guess what, like Neil is going to say next, and like it was really ridiculous, like now that I think of it. But I kind of like pushed myself, but at 40 hours I'm like, man, like this is hard, right? Like I'm just surviving on a liquid diet and black coffee as a kid.
Yeah, but had you had coffee before?
No, I was just on black coffee. They would fill black coffee in a bottle, throw it in, so in the deep end we could have actually black coffee and keep
and would you just have like a carb drink?
Or I can't even remember because this is India in 97.
Yeah, what would that have been? Like Exceed or something?
I don't know. There was this drink called Glucon D. I don't know if it's still around, but it was a pretty, it's basically sugar. And I don't think we had electrolytes. So I survived. All I can remember is black coffee, and I loved it. I mean, I still can feel the taste of that sip I would take of black coffee. And I think it was loaded with sugar. So
right.
So yeah, I think 40 hours in, my coach made up some fictitious record. He's like, at least break the state record, do 48 hours. So like, all right, we'll go through 48 hours. And so 48 hours passed. And I think Ashish, my buddy who came up with this genius idea, I think he was not a stronger swimmer, but he obviously he could go without sleep longer. So he's like, I'm done, man. Like, let's get out. And I had more energy. I just couldn't stay awake. But that's the point where we had a lot of support. We had about 3,000 people came to the pool.
What?
Yeah. And
because of the MTV or like?
Yeah, because of the MTV. And then a lot of students from IIT would jump in and swim 6 hours with us, 7 hours, just do laps, just so that psychologically you can see someone swimming with you. And, whenever you slowed down or were drinking water, you could talk to someone. But a lot of people came in and participated just to make sure we went through. So,
could you touch bottom or not? Or was that part of the rules?
I think there was. So anytime you touched the bottom, your time was cut off. So actually, we ended up staying for over 80 hours. But the time we touched for a medical checkup, because they were doing blood pressure tests, like they were like, these guys will die, right? So those hours were cut off from our record. Otherwise, we would have had a lot more margin. But no, we couldn't. So we were minimizing how much we stood, how much we stopped, and I think all I remember is day 3. Like I made it to day 3, and that was it. It was like I started hallucinating because it was 3 days of no sleep,
and not in a cool way.
Yeah, not in a cool way. Actually, it might be cool now. Think of it. Like, I thought I was a dolphin, and I was going in, coming out. I actually thought I was in SeaWorld because I think I've seen like SeaWorld on television. So I was imagining because there were 3,000 people out there. So I was like, oh, there's a crowd here. There's these hoops in the water. I started seeing things underwater. So I think the biggest fear my parents had was I would dive in while swimming, trying to pick up books or things like that I thought I was seeing. And it would freak them out. So I just remember my mom on the deck crying, and my brother was 5 years old, 5 years younger than me. So he was 7. And so trying to be a sport, he's like, I'll do the last 12 hours with you. So at the age of 7, he jumped in and tried to swim the last 12 hours. But I just don't remember. I was just hallucinating. So everyone who swam with me, I did some pretty shitty things to them or said or and I think that's, while we ended up breaking the record at the end of it, I think this was my journey of endurance, persistence, risk, and then shame. Because at the end, for 10 years, I felt really embarrassed and shameful for actually finishing this and the things I did to people in the last 12 hours.
Really?
Yeah. So I never told the story.
Did they tell you about it afterwards? Were they like, hey man, Neil, you kind
It's on film. It's all there.
Okay. Have you seen the film?
I've seen part of it once, but I think people told me everything I said and did in a way. I remember distinctly trying to drown someone who was my friend, but I just hated him because we competed in short distance. And I was like, all right, you're here, let me just drown you, hit you. And my brother, because we used to play WWE growing up, I wanted to wrestle him in the water, and it was just
do you remember which wrestler you were?
I was Hulk Hogan. Okay. Yeah. So we finished it. I mean, at 78 hours, my coach was like, this is it, you guys are out. You've broken the record. Both of you get out of the water. And I remember coming out, but I don't remember anything after that for a day. I was in the hospital just recovering, because if you stay for 3 days in the water, your hand pretty much, you were exposed to the sun, so you're sunburned.
Man.
Wow. All the grooves in your hand are pretty deep because you're in water for 3 days. So you have a lot of shrinkage for 3 days.
Right.
And then, so I came out, I woke up in a hospital, and I think a day later came to the pool, and I was like, all right, we did this.
And MTV, I'm assuming at that point you're probably all over the national news. You're famous at that point.
Yeah, I was famous. I was quite famous at that time. I think my mom keeps all of this in a closet, because we also decided not to talk about it ever. Because of the shame that I felt for years. I think now it's comfortable.
Okay.
But my mom has the cuttings and all the film. It's still there. It's just we barely sit down and ever like say, let's look at this stuff.
And did you start feeling bad about it? Like as soon as you had finished the thing and woken up in the hospital, were you like, oh my God, like what did I do?
I think when I came back to the pool and people started telling me what I did, like the medical doctor on duty was like, dude, you said some pretty nasty things to me and your mom and your dad. And I think that was the most, like that hurt the most, like the stuff I told my parents. And that stuck with me because I didn't put this stuff in my resume for like ever. I never spoke about this till I turned 25. And then someone found it on like a lot of the IITians here in the Bay Area. And they're like, oh, like, you know, Neil, like you did this stuff. And then it kind of, the word got out. So I'm like, you know, I think I have to own it now. And
yeah, I mean, that's heavy to do something that intense, taking you so far beyond what someone's limits are as a person, whether they're an adult, but like particularly like as a child, and then to like have to carry that with you. That must have been pretty intense. Yeah.
So actually it taught me a very important life lesson in retrospect. All of that was in my head. Nobody cared. Right? So, and I think this happens with us a lot of times, whether you're at work or starting something, just generally, we try to think that our actions, everyone's watching us, everybody cares about us, talks about us, and it's beyond your family, nobody does, right? And I think once you realize that, it changes your perspective about life and about failure and about shame and trying things because just you're not that significant in the world. And I think that's what I learned. It took me 10 years to learn it, but when I learned it, that made it easy for me to go quit my job, you know, take those risks because I was like, no one cares, you know, there's only upside. What
created that transformation for you? Why did that realization finally come to you after all that time?
Because when people started asking me about this and I felt comfortable talking, I just realized nobody remembered all the bad stuff. Right. I mean, it's not really bad. I mean, it was embarrassing as a 12-year-old, but nobody cared. But as a 12-year-old or even as an adult, we sometimes create this bubble around us and think it's super important. And like, you know, this is the first thing someone's going to think about you. And I realized the people who were there and who remember me, and like, these are like people who are 8-9 years older. They're quite successful now in the Bay Area, and they're like, we just remember you for doing this crazy thing, man. Like, nobody cares about the shit you said. That just made it fun for us to watch. But like, you know, so I just realized that, oh wow, you know, it's all in my head. And if it's in my head, then how many such like similar things have I stopped myself from doing or trying because it's all in my head? And I was like, So it just made it easy then to start taking risks and failing. Like it changed my perspective about failure. There was no failure. There was no shame. There was like, you know, I define what it is because no one else really cares.
And when you were a kid, what kind of attitude did your parents have towards failure and risk taking?
I think it was just like any other typical Indian competitive parent. I think they wanted me to succeed. It was, you know, failure, I wouldn't say it was not an option, but I think it was drilled in me that, you know, you're competitive, you need to be really good in your in your academics, you need to be good in sport. And I think I don't think that has changed. I think my parents still like, you know, I did the Ironman in Turkey 2 weeks ago, half Ironman there. And I don't care about my timing. I mean, I PR'd, I did really well. I was super happy. Thanks, man.
That's awesome, dude.
But the first thing my mom asked me is like, what was your time?
Seriously?
Yeah. I'm like, Mom, like,
damn,
you're 60.
tough crowd, man.
Yeah, tough crowd. And I'm like, I was like, I don't know. And I'm sure they have like this, they've Googled every single thing I've done and have like a record of all my times and stuff I've done. So, well, you know.
Do you think they have a spreadsheet?
They do. I'm pretty sure they do.
Wow.
So,
okay.
but I don't think it was intentional as much as like that's the only thing they knew.
Sure.
Growing up,
Yeah.
in low middle class, like you're looking for signals of success, and some signals of success was money. Sometimes it was grades, and for us that. So I think that's just how they were programmed, and but I think if they hadn't forced me into it, I wouldn't be here. Like that thing at the age of 12, they didn't want me to do it. That was my choice. They hated that I did it. They wanted me to get out of the water and give up.
Really? Like they were encouraging you to get out?
Yeah, I mean, because I think for any parent to see me go through that hallucination, like potentially drowning and dying and like saying shit, like my parents were like, he needs to get out. So I do have that memory of my mom crying. So I think that was the shame, is just like putting my parents through that.
Right.
So I know that I am really grateful for them for doing it. I probably hated them for a couple of years when they first got me into it, but I think it defined my life. I think I wouldn't be here without that event, that
Right.
thing as a 12-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, as you just mentioned, you're still doing endurance sports in various forms today. But after that experience when you were 12, what made you want to continue in endurance sports?
I just realized I was mentally very tough. And I was naive. So whenever an opportunity came up, whether it was swimming, in the ocean for 12 hours or like I did the Bay Bridge to Golden Gate Bridge, which is a 7-mile swim, like it's just somehow programmed in my head that, well, let's try it first. And if it gets hard, we'll figure out how to, overcome that. Like, and that sort of trait of jumping in and persisting and which is something that requires a lot of mental strength, just happens to be endurance sport, right? And entrepreneurship next. So I feel like it was just pattern matching. Like I developed that as a kid and then realized that I could do similar things again and again. And it just fell in that bucket where most of the things that I ended up trying were long distance running, endurance cycling and entrepreneurship, which is probably the toughest endurance sports to do because it's a slog for a long time. And I think it's, I think a couple of weeks ago I ran in Tahoe 50 miles without training, and I was like, I hated the last 2-3 hours of it, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to go back and do it again, right? And that's what most people who get into endurance sports, they kind of love the journey of it, because it's the experience of pain and like overcoming that, which is actually the success and the failure. It's not like finishing at the finish line. So I just.
But what do you feel like you're getting out of it by having that experience kind of like over and over and over again? Like, are you picking out new and different challenges, or is it reinforcing your mental strength? Is it like exercising that kind of mental muscle?
Yeah, I think one of my board members told me that you've done enough to reinforce that you have persistence and grit. Just stop. Pick another skill. Because the last one I tried to do, I almost again like had a concussion and didn't make it because there was no DNF. I ran the Grand Canyon rim to rim to rim, and you're carrying all your stuff on you and you can't really give up unless you come back up 9,000 feet. So I had a pretty bad last hour, and so my board member was like, I think you're done. Pick another skill in that list that Angela Duckworth has told you to do. And
let's hit rewind. How did you get a concussion? Did you like collapse?
Yeah.
Turn an ankle? Like what happened?
No, I just collapsed. I just was out of energy at the end. And if anyone has been to the Grand Canyon, it's a 50-ish mile run with 20,000 feet of elevation up and down. So the last 8 miles is about 8,000 feet of climbing and in the dark with all your food and stuff on you, and it gets cold. So I basically stopped eating 4-5 hours in. I just couldn't consume any more gels and food. So I just lost consciousness and hit hit something.
And since this is the Bay Area, I have to ask this question. Was the board member doing the run with you?
No.
No, not this time?
Not this time.
Okay. Endurance sports, not just popular with entrepreneurs, also very popular with board members.
Yes.
And people in the finance community, right?
Most of the other things I've done happen to be with investors or board members that I end up doing with, yeah. They're usually with me on it. So.
Yeah. So talk a little bit then about that transposition of this risk-taking attitude, saying like, hey, why not? And realizing, wow, I can go much further than maybe mentally than maybe I thought I could, and much farther physically than you thought you could. How did that then translate over once you made that move from Cisco into being an entrepreneur? Yeah.
So I think I realized I have those skills. And then when I failed in my first attempt in Indonesia, it was like bringing back memories. I can go on, let's try this. So I finished the first month with zero success in what I wanted to accomplish in my plan, but my next destination was Mongolia. And if Indonesia was bad, Mongolia is even more remote with like no internet, nothing, right? So
it's yak-powered internet.
Yeah, right? Yak-powered internet, yeah, right. So I land in Ulaanbaatar and I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I need to create some system to bring internet here. It's like freaking remote. And so I did what I was comfortable with. There was the first inaugural Ulaanbaatar marathon on the day I landed. So it's like, let me go run that. And
I'm
going to meet someone, doing the run. Mostly they're expats running because locals are like,
probably someone from the venture community.
Some diplomat, someone will be there. And I mean, it turned out they were. So I met some amazing people there, and just
how did you meet them? Because I've heard
running. There's no one else. Like it was the first run. There were 100 participants, and I think 99 were Japanese American aid workers, like USAID and Peace Corps guys, and basically. The ambassador was there, the US ambassador. Like, it was like the most chilled out place. Like, everyone knows each other.
Right.
If you have a common interest. And turns out everyone was running the Ulaanbaatar marathon. So we just ended up meeting the 99 familiar faces, and people had the sense of community. And so while running, I kept telling them, hey, look, I'm here. I need to figure this out. Like, how do I go about doing this? I need internet. I need to buy parts. Do you know where I can get stuff? They were very helpful. So I think that community kind of helped me figure out that I can be very resourceful, keep going to Beijing, which is not that far from Ulaanbaatar, like take the train down. And I kind of put together a device, which again, my Cisco history and background in building routers was I put together a tiny device that allowed, asynchronously to use some mobile connection and pull content from YouTube and a bunch of other places, which was illegal to do because I justified it saying I'm pulling educational content, so it's fine. So it was just like pulling it down, caching it on it, and then creating this Wi-Fi hotspot for like this whole school in community. And I built it with battery so that even if the power goes away, it runs. And so I solved a big part of the puzzle. Without internet, like all my kids in the classroom could actually connect to this Wi-Fi device. It's kind of like your Apple TV at home today, but this was 2011. So nothing like this existed. So we had to build a wireless router with some software in it, with battery in it, with a lot of storage, so that it could keep pulling new stuff from YouTube that was educational, and like then anyone could connect to it and think they are on the internet.
So how did you MacGyver this thing? Did you just have like a router in your backpack and then you're like piecing stuff together? Like,
yeah, I started that way. I remember there was an article like wireless router in a backpack, and I was walking around Ulaanbaatar, like beaming out signals with content. But no, I just, I knew what had to be done. I just didn't know where to get it.
Okay.
And so I kept going back to Beijing, and, they have all the parts there in China, and whatever that mall. I forget the name of the mall, but you can get every single thing you want.
If you say so.
Yeah, you can get every single component. So I went there, put it together, and it took me a couple of months. So again, like instead of staying 1 month this time, I ended up staying 9 months in Mongolia. So that changed my plan. This became real. Like, I built this device. Took me a month to build it, but it also immediately I started seeing the impact of having access to content for the children who are learning. I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, this can become real. So that was the seed for my entrepreneurship. I didn't think of it as entrepreneurship. I was like problem solving, and Fast Company picked up some reporter actually found out that I'd built this device and applied for some grant money, and like, this is so cool, like Khan Academy in a wireless backpack in Mongolia, and it was in like Fast Company. And so then I had some venture guys reach out. It's like, that's a good product, you should start a company. And I was like, I don't know. I didn't think about starting a company. I did not know what entrepreneurship was. I was an engineer and, just figuring things out. But the 9 months in Mongolia, came back to the Bay Area, and I had term sheets from a couple of investors who were like, this is cool. This could like bring education to the masses, and like, you should do this. And I was like, yeah, I don't know what it is, but sure, it sounds interesting. Like, I'll figure it out. So I said yes. And that was a slog the next 8 years. But
yeah,
it's like just any company, you have someone else's money now, and you need to figure out how to build a business. And I think I realized it was so easy to solve the problem of bringing internet to the remote parts, but now trying to make money out of that was actually not my goal. But now I had to figure out how to do it. So
right. Solving that initial hardware problem was kind of like when you jumped in the pool when you were 12, right? And then it's like the next 8 years were the 78 hours.
Yeah. So right? That was it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you must have had to have learned so many different things over the course of the next 8 years. But one thing I'm really curious about, because we've literally never met before, right? Like, we're meeting for the first time now, but having met you, having heard some of your stories, I think part of what's probably remarkable about your character and your skill set, it's not just like from an attitude point of view, you have this like, hey, why not kind of attitude. You have a lot of endurance and the willingness to do hard things. You have technical proficiency, but in addition to that, it seems like you're a very charismatic, open person who's a great communicator. And that's like something that not everybody has who has those other qualities. It's like very differentiated, I would say. And that must have been a huge part of what helped to enable you to move forward.
It did. I did not realize I had some of those skills.
Right.
But I think I had to work hard to acquire them. I had to hire a coach to help me through that journey, just building a company, and just a personal coach to help me through it.
What were the areas you worked on the most, or what did you struggle with the most as you went through that process?
I think it was just people. Like, I did not, I did not know how to manage people. And so I could solve problems. Like, I'm an individual contributor. And it was very easy to solve that. But now I had people reaching out and saying, hey, we want to work with you. This is such a strong mission. And these were people who had better credentials than me on paper, right? So I was kind of overwhelmed. I did not know how to distinguish signal and noise when someone's giving you advice. So I used to listen to anything that someone I thought had a better resume than me was saying. And I learned the hard way over the years that that's not always true. But I had to get someone to help me. So I think I surrounded myself with people I just absolutely trusted with my life. It's the same thing with sports. Like, I have one partner with I'll trust with my life. And I just realized you don't need too many people. So I think I developed some of these skill sets of just managing people, knowing how to fire people when things are not working out, because it's actually better for them too. But it's really hard to do when you're setting up your company for the first time. So just the regular challenges of, how do you communicate to an investor? How do you say no to people? Like, how do you not let one or two of your investors really govern your life and drive it. Like, I didn't know any of it, and I learned that, and that made me a better communicator. Like, I'll give you an example where at one point we had 80 people in the company, and it's still growing. So the education company I ended up starting is still growing. It serves in India close to 1 million kids now. And but my default behavior when I showed up to work was open my laptop, go in a corner, sit down, do like a morning meeting, and then not want to talk to people. Right? I just wanted to build. And I realized that's not what leadership is. Like, I had to, everything that worked and failed was my responsibility, because people were coming to work to follow my vision, not because they had a job. And it took me a while to realize that, at least a year and a half. And then I think I got better over time to just spend more time with the team, and now I enjoy it. Like, now this is, like, I can't imagine doing anything else. Like, even with something that I'm starting now, it's all about people. And I realized that's my superpower, is being able to actually see the potential in people and like the vision they have for themselves, and like help them execute it, whether it's in my company or just whether they are building their own company and I'm helping them take my superpowers and help them. But it's something I hated, but I learned, and I realized, oh wow, I'm actually an extrovert. I get energy from people, but why was I just, hiding behind a laptop all these years?
The transformation has worked, but I'm wondering, did you realize that on your own, or did someone on your team like point out to you, like, hey man, like this is a blind spot and you need to grow here?
My coach did. I think I owe it. People overstate whether coaches are needed in your life or not. I do think when you're a high performer, this is how she had articulated to me. She's like, if you draw a quadrant of high skill and high will and an axis, and then you have the 4 quadrants around it. If you're in the high skill, high will category, you need a coach. If you're in the high will but low skill, you need training. And very often you kind of mix these two and then get undesirable outcomes and think that coaching doesn't work or training doesn't work. So I realized that I was, for certain things, in the low skill, high will category, and for many things in the high skill, high will. So I had to have a coach, and for certain things I needed to go for training to learn how to be a better manager. And that journey with my coach for 5 years really transformed me. Like, simple example, not relevant here because we live in the valley and like you're in your shorts, but sorry. At Cisco, I showed up in spandex every day, right? I was like, it's okay, no one cares. I go back to India and I start this business, and the first 5 people I hired, I didn't realize that going to work every day, because they live with their parents. In India, you live with your family, right, until you're married. So these are really smart guys, very motivated, coming into work. They're all dressed up, and I would show up in shorts or spandex and in my bike shorts. And then I was like, it's okay. We're all here to do work. Like, no one said anything to me.
Because you're the boss.
I'm the boss.
Yeah, nobody's going to say shit to you.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, but 1 month in, 2 months in, like the team started resenting me. And I was like, why are you resenting me? I couldn't really read it, right? And with my coach, as she dug into this, it was like, think of your employees. I think she did talk to a few of them to realize what was happening. She's like, think of your employees. For them, going to work is something very sacred, right? It's their first job. What are they telling their parents, or what will they end up telling their parents if they say their boss shows up in bike shorts or in, running shorts to work? It's not professional. Like, it might be okay, but for them, based on all the stereotypes they have, it's not what a boss should be doing. So they are not probably feeling pride in coming to work, even though they love the work they're doing. And I was very defensive. I was like, no, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. And then I realized that I had to change my behavior. But when someone told me that, hey, Neil, you need to wear, dress up well and show up to work, I wouldn't listen to them. But when it came from the point of view of showing empathy towards the team of what matters to them, it actually became very easy for me to change my behavior. And till date, I have never shown up to work in shorts. It's like 7 years in. Because I stopped looking at things purely from my perspective, or like this is how someone tells you to do things. But I also started empathizing with the team and what matters to them. And it was so much easier to change my behavior when I looked at it from that perspective. So I think that was a big transformation in leadership for me, because in every mistake I made building the company, I would just ask myself, like, stop thinking about yourself. What's okay for you? Think about others. Right. And I think that helps a lot. Even now, when I'm advising companies or being on the board, like I try to now tell founders to do that. It's you have your own principles and you have your own values, but when you're building something and you're taking people along, it's not just what matters to you, it's what matters to everyone, because they have faith in you and they're putting a lot in it. So try to think about them.
And how do you help them tune into like having that empathic kind of bearing?
It's the same way my coach did for me, is just asking a lot of questions, because I think if you're in that high skill, high will, you actually have all your answers inside, right? It's being able to figure out a way, like figuring out a tool to get it out of you and see it. So it's just many ways to do it, right? Like I learned like 15 different techniques and frameworks, and I keep trying it out and planting seeds and seeing if one works. It doesn't work, try the next one. But it does lead to success, like somehow or the other. I think founders or people I've worked with see that what is being asked of them is something that they inherently have in their core values. So it just becomes very easy for them to make that change, versus if you come in as an advisor and say this is what you need to do, or as a board member, like this is what good behavior looks like. I'm pretty sure with the WeWork guys also, if someone tried it that way, it might have worked.
Yeah, well,
maybe.
I'm just thinking back to the beginning of this conversation. I'm thinking like, man, if shorts freak these people out and totally get a cultural thing, like it had to change over time. What if they had known that you ate ice cream for breakfast? How fucked would you have been then?
I know.
Right?
I know. Yeah. I'm glad they don't know a lot about me. My other behaviors. So
yeah. So I am curious, like whether it was your time in Mongolia or throughout this trajectory building that business, how did you fit in everything else that you do? Like tactically, like where is the time in the day when you're training for I'm going to go do rim to rim to rim, or an Ironman, or 12-mile swim, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, so I think this is probably a theme that you've touched upon a lot, which is I think I wouldn't call myself peak performer, but I think I have figured out that, if I set my goal on something, then you make time for it. So it doesn't seem like effort, like getting up at 5 a.m. and getting a run in, or like I run to work,
right?
And get my, adrenaline and like all the things I need through that. So I've figured out how to craft my life well, I think so. Which for me, a big part of it is my sports and endurance activities, right? Like it's the only thing that keeps me sane. For some people it's meditation, but for me, doing a long, 8-hour bike ride is extremely meditative. And so I just find time for it, it doesn't seem like I have to find a balance. It's just there, right? Because most other things, when I think of like work and endurance, entrepreneurship, like it's a series of experiments you're running, and sometimes you need to step back and find space in both internally and in what you're doing to actually see things differently. And so I find that doing sports like this or some crazy event just gives me a lot of space. This is again like one of the things from childhood, like I'm a big Pink Floyd like groupie, and I used to have a band which we covered Pink Floyd, and one of the best things about Pink Floyd was all your songs, they inserted space in it. They were not rushing to finish something. Right. And that was the beauty of it. Like nobody has been able to recreate that type of music. And I think of life that way. Like, you need to find spaces. And so I make it a point to do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's jazz. That's all great music. It's about the silences as much as about like when you're playing, right?
Yeah, and I get my silence through running and swimming and doing the stuff. So it's
Were you a lead guitarist in the band?
No, I used to play the keyboards and synthesizer.
Okay, keys. All right. Atmospheric.
Yeah.
Right?
That was the only band we could cover because no one else used a keyboardist or synthesizer except for The Who, but yeah.
What was the band called?
Lupus Walks.
Lupus Walks.
Yeah, it's the Cry of the Wolf.
Okay. How old were you when you had the band?
I was in college, so I went to NC State, which is the Wolf Pack. So
got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Do you still play music today?
No, but I'm trying to figure out how to get back into it. Like if I see a piano or like a drums, I get back into it. But I'm trying to find a group in San Francisco where I can, join and maybe play again.
Do you play at home at all, like just to unwind?
No.
So next time I see you, I want some progress.
Sure.
Against that goal.
Yeah.
So what are you doing now?
So now, I took a year off after I moved off from my last company. We brought in someone to run it, and I was trying to figure out.
That sounds like such a cool thing to do. That's so San Francisco, dude. Like, yeah, fuck it. I took a year off. Did it feel good?
No, I mean, I did work, but I took a year off from all the pressures of investors and things like that.
Okay.
Like I had a year to myself where I was doing a bunch of consulting work with other startup founders. And
did you enjoy that?
Oh, I loved it. I got to work on some cool things. Like there's the studio here, a group called Purple Patch Fitness, which works with all peak performance. Matt Dixon.
Yeah, I want to get Matt on.
You should.
Yeah, he'd be great. I interviewed him years ago. I'd love to do it again.
So
he's an interesting guy.
I worked with Matt and help build a product for them right now, and the digital. Basically, I redid all their digital software for Matt because he was my coach for a while.
And not to go off on too much of a Matt tangent, but what I think is really interesting about Matt is that all of his success now is grounded in his failure as a professional athlete, which is like he just trained himself into the ground and he realized like this isn't the way to do this, right?
Yeah.
And now he has an incredibly successful practice.
Very successful. And I think the key thing with his practice is that it works for time-starved athletes who are basically entrepreneurs or like just busy, and so it's just great. I've kind of known his work, and then when I had this time off, I started helping him. I still help him, so I got to do things that I like to do.
That's awesome.
And so now I finally, I was trying to think, what do I do? I'm in San Francisco now, and I moved back. And there's the obvious, like, build another tech product to optimize something by like 5% or build another app or work on something that no one else here is working on. So I picked something I know nothing about. I'm working on this whole problem of aging, but not for making us live longer, which everyone in the Valley wants to do, but trying to figure out how do we age well and with a sense of purpose and community. So it's about 30% of our population in the world and even here are actually retiring but have amazing superpowers, right? Like they're so very talented. They've done something for 40 years, which means they have some persistence and grit and, like something to check the box. But, and they're going to live longer. So what can they do with their time? It's like, okay, so let's go talk to people, figure out what are their superpowers, and let's see what else they can do. So right now I was very early stages working with people who have actually retired educators from Midwest and basically all over the country, leaving California and the coast, but trying to teach them some skills, and I would say reskilling them just 10% from what they already have to do some pretty cool things. One being actually they help onboard customers of software companies who don't know how to use the product, because educators are really good at teaching. They sit at home on Zoom and for like 2-3 hours a day so if you buy QuickBooks and you don't know how to set it up,
that'd be correct. I wouldn't know how to set it up.
Neither do I. So, and it's amazing how many people who are actually users of these products don't know how to use it, because if you've been in a classroom, a kid can't learn just by watching a bunch of videos. But somehow over here, including me as engineers, we believe that our products are so easy to use and people will just figure it out, DIY, and that's not really the case. So I have these amazing educators sitting at home, jumping on Zoom, and they walk you through and teach you how to use products. And so it's kind of, I'm seeing some signs of a community being built up where they're doing it because they have time and they want to feel more purposeful, and they have these amazing skills. So yeah, I'm just trying to get them back into aging well.
How did you end up focusing on that problem set?
I always surrounded myself, not by choice, but my friends are at least 20 years older than me.
Okay.
Right from the swimming days where the guy was like,
sure,
double my age. Everyone I do my endurance activities happens to be, at least twice my age, and they're amazing. They just are like rock stars, like people I want to be like. So I started hearing this sort of word being thrown out, which is we feel invisible. Like they're just really talented, but they're like, we're starting to feel invisible as we are growing older because of all the biases in hiring. And we know this living here in San Francisco. Like you talk about sexism and you talk about racism, like ageism is the biggest bias in the valley, right? So I just started hearing this from accomplished COOs of companies, and these are my friends feeling that way. So I started digging deep into it and thinking, if they feel like this, what about all the other people, including my parents and people I know? So I just went down this path of doing a little bit more discovery. That I think this, just like early childhood, which is an important part of our life, like growing old is another phase, like a stepping stone, and we just don't know as a society how to handle it well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have terms for childhood and adolescence and being an adult, but then it's just boom, you fall down and you become old and unwanted and invisible. So that just got me interested because I thought it was a big problem and I can face it with my friends. I feel it, and it's something a 22-year-old kid won't work on. So if I have to, work on it, I feel like I'm in a better position to do it because nobody's thinking about it here. So I just thought, let's try.
And what's the company called?
It's called Walkabout, which is going on your next journey.
Yeah.
So going on a walkabout. So yeah, that's what it's called.
And you're live now?
Yeah, we are live. I would say it's still done. We have about 100 people who have retired and working and doing these sessions. Still a lot to figure out. Again, my first gig and everything else, I have no idea where this is going to go, but it's so much fun to get on calls with these amazing people from the country and listening to their stories and listening to what they have ideas about, right? I call them guides, and one of the guides applied and she's like, I have this idea of doing something called device advice. This is Geek Squad.
Right.
It's I want to go and teach people how to use the iPhones in my community. I'm like, awesome. Why don't I market this for you? For everyone else, you can teach them on Zoom. So it's just amazing to hear people's stories. And maybe that's why I'm doing it in a way, because I just think that people who have, they have so much wisdom to offer. And because being a curious person, I want to absorb as much as I can. So this is an amazing target audience to work with. It's just hearing their stories, their life stories, and trying to figure out how to put that back into work. It's selfish. I'm getting more out of it than them, but I'm hoping that one day it creates, it changes our mindset about what people who are aging can do and cannot do.
No, that's amazing. And if people want to find out more about the company, where can they go?
Oh, well, it's on my LinkedIn, but I am not on any other social platforms that much. So you can find me on LinkedIn.
Neil, so awesome to get to sit down and talk to you. Our mutual friend Camille Ricketts recommended that we talk to each other. Shout out to Camille. She's absolutely right.
Yeah. Love
Camille's amazing. So awesome to get to talk to you. I'd say let's go on a bike ride, but To be honest with you, I'm afraid you're going to make me ride for like 100 hours. So we'll have to talk about it.
We'll do a short one, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
If you have questions, comments, feedback, or want to suggest a guest, please reach out to @HardwayPod on social or email me at choosethehardway@gmail.com. I've had times in my life when I've been in hot pursuit of my dreams and gave up when I hit obstacles I didn't think I could overcome. After more than 2 decades working with the world's top performers, I've learned that to be the best in the world or just find your own personal best, you have to choose the hard way. There aren't shortcuts or hacks that will get you there. And you're going to fail over and over and over along the way. Through Choose the Hard Way, I hope to empower more people to reach beyond who they think they are and just keep going, no matter what they encounter in life, so that they can reach their goals and dreams. You can help me make it happen when you take a moment to subscribe to Choose the Hard Way, leave a review, and rate the show on iTunes or wherever you listen. It only takes 30 seconds. I truly appreciate it, and so will the people who you help to find the show. You can also sign up for the Choose the Hard Way newsletter to get more information about episodes, guests, and other awesome things when you go to choosethehardway.com/newsletter. You are what you overcome. Choose the hard way.